It was October 13th, 1869, and two hired hands on a small farm in central New York, Henry and Frank, were hired to do some digging on the property of the landowner William Newell. As they began digging in one specific section of the property, they began to strike with their shovels something very dense within the soil, and they thought, oh my goodness, this ground contains rock. This will add significant time to our project. And so they began to dig around, and as they began to dig around, the rock continued to grow and grow and grow. And then as they were digging, they noticed certain features, and they noticed things that actually resembled a human body. And so they dug and dug and dug, and finally they created a 15-foot section that they had excavated, and within it stood nearly an 11-foot tall petrified giant. To their amazement, they ran and told the landowner, William Newell, all about what they had discovered, and Newell quickly jumped on the opportunity. Word began to spread throughout the surrounding countryside that a giant had been found on the property of Mr. Newell, and so he actually erected a tent over the excavated site and began to charge admission. Admission was charged, and he was making money hand over fist for people who wanted to get a glimpse of the giant. A very wealthy man by the name of David Harney from Syracuse caught word of this thing that had happened, and he journeyed and saw the giant for himself. Amazed by what he was seeing, he offered an exorbitant amount of money to Mr. Newell for the giant, $23,000. That's 1869. I know we've talked a lot about inflation in recent months, but that's almost $1 million in today's money. Mr. Harney transported the petrified giant and had it displayed in a museum. And then he began to make money for people who were traveling to Syracuse and wanting to see this incredible thing that had been excavated. The story takes another significant turn by a very popular man at that time, and even to this day, a man by the name of P.T. Barnum catches wind of what was happening. And so he journeys and sees this giant, and upon seeing it, thought, I need to have this for my show. And so P.T. Barnum goes to David Harney and offers him $50,000 for the giant. Mr. Harney politely declines, thinking that he will make more money over time through people who will travel to see this incredible thing. And so P.T. Barnum then devises his own plan. After the place in which the giant was being shown had shut down, he sent in one of his workers to make a wax cast of the giant. And then they take that cast and they create their own. And then he will launch an incredible misinformation campaign to threaten the credibility of Mr. Harney's giant and suggest that the one that P.T. Barnum is in possession of is the real one. Lawyers will get involved. There'll be lawsuits and hurtful words thrown back and forth. And eventually a paleontologist from Yale gets involved. And the paleontologist will examine the giant in possession of Mr. Harney. And as he begins to look over some things and notice some peculiarities, he will announce that this is a fake. This is not a petrified person. This is just a hunk of rock. It was a fake, which meant that the one that P.T. Barnum was in possession of was a forgery of a fake. Now, this story actually begins a few years earlier in a place called Ackley, Iowa. A man by the name of George Hull was in a merchandise shop, and he was buying some goods, and he was listening to a conversation that a Methodist minister was having. Mr. Hull was in possession of Darwin's The Origin of Species, and he was adamant that Christians will be willing and ready to believe anything. They're so gullible. And frustrated by this conversation he was having with this pastor, he purchases an 11-foot long block of gypsum. He has it shipped to a stonemason in Chicago and under the most extreme form of secrecy, has a petrified giant made. And then it's placed on a train. It's then transported to New York and placed on the property of his cousin, Mr. William Newell. Newell, who will hire a few hands to discover the fake giant and then launch this whole circus that ensues. A forgery of a fake. Do you know what the best way to know what a counterfeit is? It's to know what the real thing looks like. We could spend hours staring at counterfeit dollars or different things that have been faked throughout history, and you and I would not know the difference. We would not know how to make a distinction. But when you learn to know what the real thing is, discerning between the two becomes easy. We're going to begin this morning a series on the book of Proverbs. We read from Proverbs chapter 1 earlier. The book of Proverbs contains wisdom. It is a collection of sayings from Solomon, who was the king of Israel, who was the wisest man who ever lived, who, when approached by God and said, ask for anything you want, instead of wealth, he asks for wisdom. And wisdom is his thing. And so we'll spend some time unpacking the book of Proverbs, but we're going to do it through this specific lens. We're going to talk about these characters that we find within the book of Proverbs. My favorite college basketball team is the Illinois Fighting Illini. I make it no secret, I'm not a KU fan. I'm not a K-State fan. I know KU barely squeaked one out and needed a fake flagrant foul just to get it. But whoa, okay, all right, we're going to be okay. I really don't mind KU a whole lot. But my favorite basketball team is the University of Illinois Fighting Illini, and Brad Underwood was hired 7 years ago to be the coach there, and he's actually built a pretty good program, and he's recruited very well, and a few years ago he was asked this question: what do you look for when you're recruiting a player? He built a very tight locker room, a close-knit group of guys, and he said it's simple. What we're looking for is character, not characters. What we're looking for is character, not characters. And within the book of Proverbs, we run into all these different kinds of characters. The wise, the fool, the simple, the scoffer, the sluggard, all these different kinds of people that Solomon will talk about, and he'll say, here's what these kinds of people do. And so what we want to be as followers of Jesus is people of character, not characters. Tim Keller says this, that the purpose of Proverbs, the main message of Proverbs is this: you've never really thought enough about anything. The main message of Proverbs is this, that you've never really thought enough about anything. If the Bible were a medicine cabinet, the Psalms would be an ointment that you put on inflamed skin to calm and heal it. But Proverbs actually function like smelling salts. They startle us into alertness. They wake us up to the reality of the world. And Proverbs are not simple steps to a happy life. They can be applied that way, but instead there's something deeper. They are these poetic phrases that are intended to be wrestled with. Not read once in assumptions then made, but to be held onto, to be worked over and through. And when we begin to wrestle with them, we reap the benefit from wrestling with them. Proverbs are hard candy. If you popped a hard candy into your mouth and you bit into it, you might taste the smallest bit of sweetness. You'd likely break a tooth, but then the experience would be over. But if instead we do with Proverbs what the intention of a hard candy is, and we just savor it, and we begin to extract from it slowly over time, that is when wisdom has its way. Anyone could pick up the book of Proverbs and reap a benefit from them. It's possible. But it is especially the follower of Jesus who should pay attention to the wisdom espoused in this book. Jesus invites all of his followers to function as these separators, these people of distinction. They function like salt and light. They are to be a city on a hill who is witnessed and seen, and who stand out. And what better way to stand out from our society than to apply practical wisdom to one's life? Wisdom is waning in every corner of our culture and every place in our world. We live by wisdom less than we ever have. The celebrated elements of our culture do not resemble the wisdom of the word in the least. Jesus himself will instruct us to be wise builders who build on bedrock rather than on shifting sand. Jesus places a high emphasis on prudence and forethought, discernment, discipline, and the direction of one's life. It is Jesus who, when he tells parables, highlights a character known as the shrewd manager. It's also Jesus who illustrates the importance of critical thought when he tells the parable of the talents and encourages his followers to think well about what has been placed in their possession. Jesus who insists through the teaching of his parables that we don't really have things figured out. Paul says it this way in Ephesians chapter 5 as he's encouraging the church in Ephesus to live as light. He says this: be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is. See, the moment that we think we have something figured out is the moment that we should really start to wrestle with it. And Jesus most importantly, is not concerned with telling us what to do, but instead instructing us who to be. That is wisdom, when you understand the kind of person you should be in any circumstance. Understanding how to respond or react or retreat in any situation, not just a few predetermined options. We read from Proverbs chapter 1 earlier. I want to highlight the first couple verses again. The Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel. They are for gaining wisdom and instruction and for gaining words of insight. And then the final verse we read this morning was verse 7. It says this: the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. Fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. I love what Oswald Chambers says. He says this: the remarkable thing about God is that when you fear God, you fear nothing else. Whereas if you do not fear God, you fear everything else. The characters that we will inspect today are the basic building blocks of the book. They are the wise and the fool. And the way that we'll break down our time is simply by saying, here's what wise people do. We won't spend much time talking about fools because it's an easy line to draw from here's what wise people do to here's what fools do. Fools do the opposite of what wise people do. And the Proverbs frequently employ this literary technique called parallelism. It's to display distinction between the wise and the foolish. It will create an easily visible chasm between the one who walks in wisdom and the one who insists on his own way. The first thing that we see from the book of Proverbs, the thing that we see that wise people have, are this: that the wise have direction. The wise have direction. They have a calibrated aim. A rudderless ship is one that will be lost at sea. And the Christian has only really found Christ when the vessel is moving in the direction of his invitation. Come and follow me. If you were to aim an arrow, the only thing you'd be guaranteed to hit if you aimed at it is nothing. Existence is meaningless when the aim is ambiguous. And we are invited as Christians to have a wise aim, one that is calibrated towards the things that please God. And the wisdom that is found in the book of Proverbs is full of things that help us calibrate our wayfinding instruments. They teach us to say the right yeses and nos. The longer that you walk with Jesus, you begin to see the instruction found in God's word is not about making bad people good, but about helping lost people live found. People who have been caught up in darkness to step in and walk in the light. And so there's no point to claim Christ. There's no point to announce yourself as a Christian or to say, I'm a Jesus follower, if we are not first ready to fundamentally admit that our wayfinding instruments are broken. We are people who are lost at sea. There is no part of our lives that was directed in the right direction until Jesus found us. That is the teaching of Scripture. We are broken, corrupt, sinful creatures who need the redemption of a Savior. Our compasses have been calibrated by selfish aims and ambitions. Selfishness is just to live life in this circle, this perpetual motion of always chasing what's next, what's new, what's now. And it leaves us feeling more and more empty, even after every threshold and landmark that we arrive at. The thing that we thought would fill us actually leaves us feeling more empty. One of my favorite movies is The Patriot. I went on a large Mel Gibson kick when I was a junior in high school, and I watched this movie for the first time, and I love the character of Benjamin Martin. It's Mel Gibson's character in this film, and there's a moment in which he's having his boys, his young sons, he needs them to fight with him. And so as they're loading their muskets, they're placing their powder in their round, and they're placing the rod within the rifle and getting ready, he just repeats this phrase to them over and over. Some of you know this: aim small, miss small. Aim small, miss small. See, the goal of our faith, the operating assumption that we should have as people of faith is to say, what is the most precise aim I can have? How closely can I get to aiming my life in the direction that Jesus is leading? Because there's a high value in our culture to keep all of our options open. I'll admit, like, this is a pitfall for me. I love to keep my options open. I don't like it when I feel pigeonholed or pinned down or pushed into a corner and I don't have another way out. But it is foolishness to believe that we can have everything. That by somehow we gain more by keeping our options open rather than focusing our lives in a specific direction. We have to decide our direction. Otherwise, we will end up nowhere, floating aimlessly in a sea that will carry us where it wants us to go. Some of you may have read the book Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, who was a prisoner in a Nazi prison camp during World War II. He writes this: "Don't aim at success. The more you aim at it and make it a target, the more you're going to miss it. For success, like happiness, cannot be pursued. It must ensue. And it only does so as the unintended side effect of one's personal dedication to a cause greater than oneself, or as the byproduct of one's surrender to a person other than oneself. Happiness must happen, and the same holds for success. You have to let it happen by not caring about it. I want you to listen to what your conscience commands you to do and go on to carry it out to the best of your knowledge. Then you will live to see that in the long run, I say, success will follow you precisely because you had forgotten to think about it." See, happiness is one of those things where if we aim at it, we'll never arrive at it. But if instead we aim our lives, we calibrate our compass towards something that is even seemingly counterintuitive, it's then that we reap the benefits of the fulfillment, the happiness, the joy that we've been after in the first place. Let's look at a few passages from this book. Proverbs chapter 1, verses 11 through 16. Here's what Solomon says: "If they say, 'Come with us, let's set an ambush and kill someone. Let's attack some innocent person just for fun. Let's swallow them alive like Sheol, whole, like those who go down to the pit. We'll find all kinds of valuable property and fill our houses with plunder. Throw in your lot with us, and we'll share all our loot. My son, don't travel that road with them or set foot on their path, because their feet run toward evil, and they hurry to shed blood." Chapter 2, verses 6 through 8. "For the Lord gives wisdom. From his mouth come knowledge and understanding. He stores up success for the upright. He is a shield to those who live with integrity, so that he may guard the paths of justice and protect the way of his faithful followers." Chapter 2, verses 20 through 22. "So follow the way of the good and keep to the paths of the righteous. For the upright will inhabit the land, and those of integrity will remain in it. But the wicked will be cut off from the land, and the treacherous ripped out of it." Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Perhaps many of you have memorized this before. "Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not rely on your own understanding. In all your ways know him, and he will make your paths straight." Proverbs 4, 10 through 19. "Listen, my son, accept my words, and you will live many years. I'm teaching you the way of wisdom. I'm guiding you on straight paths. When you walk, your steps will not be hindered. When you run, you will not stumble. Hold on to instruction. Don't let go. Guard it, for it is your life. Keep off the path of the wicked. Don't proceed on the way of evil ones. Avoid it. Don't travel on it. Turn away from it and pass it by. For they can't sleep unless they've done what is evil. They are robbed of sleep unless they make someone stumble. They eat the bread of wickedness and drink the wine of violence. The path of the righteous is like the light of dawn, shining brighter and brighter until midday. But the way of the wicked is like the darkest gloom. They don't know what makes them stumble." Then verses 26 through 27. "Carefully consider the path for your feet, and all of your ways will be established. Don't turn to the right or to the left. Keep your feet away from evil." Did you notice in each of those passages, and these are just a few, this will continue on throughout the whole book, what is the repeated encouragement? It's to pick the right path. Wise people pick the right path. The wise choose the path of instruction, of correction, of counsel, integrity, accountability, faithfulness, stewardship, discipline, patience, persistence, obedience, righteousness, uprightness, steadfastness. Wise people pick a path that provides for them the opportunity to end up at the destination they had chosen. And in so many ways, we must pick our path over and over and over again. Because each path, whether the path of the wise or the path of the fool, it does make a promise to pay us for our pursuit. We will reap the reward of the path that we pick. Paul says it this way in Galatians chapter 5, don't be deceived. God will not be mocked. A man will reap what he sows. What is difficult about direction is that nearly every time the long road is the right road. We don't want to wait. And I hate waiting for anything. Anybody else hate waiting? Like, waiting is the worst. We avoid stoplights. We have planned routes through our small town of Fort Scott to make sure that we don't have to sit there and look at a red or yellow light. We hop in the passing lane and push the pedal down. We have microwaves and drive-thrus just to make sure that we don't have to wait any longer than is necessary in order for us to get something to eat. And some of us send a text. And if we don't get a response within just a few moments, we go from 0 to 60 in terms of outrage. And I want you to know, I've been praying for you, okay? It's going to be all right. People used to send letters to communicate. And yet, if we don't get a response to our text like that, it is the end of the world. We don't like to wait. And all of this is just this manufactured sense of urgency within our culture. It functions as this cultural current that we all get caught up in. That we're supposed to live with this busyness, this fast-paced, have what you want when you want it. Kurt Toll reminded me after first service of the quote from Dallas Willard that he's made it his ambition to ruthlessly eliminate hurry from his life. That's what wise people do. The long road is so unappealing when the shortcut has the payoff that we can see. We're an outcome-driven society. The opportunity to accelerate the process to pursue any given thing creates more problems than it solves. You want a new car? No problem. You can drive it off the lot today, zero money down. Don't think about a payment until next month. The illusion of affordability drives our modern mind into an unstable and unsteady pace of acquisition. I want what I want it now. But wise people don't operate this way. I know a few wise people. And what I witness from their lives is this, that wise people value pace and space. In other words, wise people don't rush into decisions of any kind. They're calculated. They're confident. And they make repeated conscious efforts towards one continuous end. They have a pace, but they also create space. They create margin in their life to be able to be ready. They're prepared to pounce on an advantageous move. Wise people are not slow decision makers. Rather, they are calibrated towards a long game. They seek an outcome that is driven by small, incremental inputs that pay off over time. And many of us live life, and I will raise my hand right along with you, like we're those dogs from Up. They're in the middle of a conversation that the Pixar movie Up, where they're like, squirrel! They chase after the next thing. And they lose their train of thought in an instant because there's something exciting and attractive over here, and they chase after that only to lose track of what they were tracking and jump at the next squirrel and run over this way. We tend to live life this way, forgetting the thing that we committed ourselves to, or forgetting the wise and noble pursuit, forgetting the place that we've aimed our arrow, the direction that we had decided on, and we're easily distracted. To be wise is to have a good why. Wise people are not overly emotive. They don't make decisions based on circumstance, but instead on principles. You can see the importance of this approach for the person of faith. Wisdom and faith have immense overlap. This is the line of thinking that Solomon is hoping we catch on to as we learn to embrace these sayings of wisdom in our lives. They are there to help us become people of greater faith. I love what Levi Lusko says. Now yells louder, but later lasts longer. Wise people pick the path that leads to the ultimate, not the immediate. You can indulge every longing with a pleasurable outcome, but you will not find satisfaction in a pursuit of pleasure. Again, as Frankel says, you cannot aim at happiness. Happiness happens as a byproduct of a greater pursuit. You will, however, find satisfaction through sacrifice, through stewardship, and through seeking the kingdom. The things that Jesus calls us to do that seem counterintuitive, they are the path marked out. Proverbs chapter 5, 3 through 6. Through the lips of the forbidden woman drip honey, and her words are smoother than oil. But in the end, she's as bitter as wormwood and as sharp as a double-edged sword. Her feet go down to death. Her steps head straight for Sheol. She doesn't consider the path of life. She doesn't know that her ways are unstable. Wise people pick the right path. Not a path that they will trailblaze, but the path that is marked out for them. A race that has already been run by our Savior, Jesus, who invites us to come and follow him. Pick your path. Aim your arrow. Decide your direction. But you cannot live in the in-between. Second thing that wise people have is discernment. The wise have discernment, or a calculated approach. There are two words used in the opening section of the book of Proverbs in verse 2. Two Hebrew words. The first is chokmah. It means wisdom or acumen or a skill that is acquired. We would translate it as the ability to discern. There's another word used there. It's bina. It's to understand or to pay attention to or to put under examination. Again, meaning discernment. Tim Keller says that discernment is the ability to notice distinction and shades of difference where others only see a blur. The ability to notice distinction and shades of difference where others only see a blur. Some decisions only require knowledge, like here's the right medication to take, and some only compliance to rules, like here's what it looks like to commit adultery or not. But no Bible verse will tell you exactly whom to marry, which job to take, what kind of move you should make. These decisions require wisdom, and they require specifically discernment. It means that we know why we're making the decision, not just what decision we are making. Because wisdom is the intersection of information and application. It's knowing the right thing to do and also knowing why you should do that right thing. Because knowing what to do does not make one wise. Having the right motivations, habits, and guiding philosophies can make up for a mountain of facts that we don't know. Wisdom is rightly applying the information, and transformation happens to us when we have the right application of that information. And so Proverbs' aim is not to make decisions for you, but to teach you how to be discerning. Not to tell you what to think, but to teach you how to think. This is the place that we've gotten to in our world where we have become so tribally aligned, so siloed off in our culture, so attached to our allegiances that we no longer think critically about a situation. We just ask the question, tell me what to think. What does the leader of this specific group tell me I should believe about this thing? Okay, I know what to think about it, but we've forgotten how to think through anything. Discernment is that ability to see through the noise, to cut through the chaos. I love this quote from T.S. Eliot. He says that when we don't know or we don't know enough, emotion masquerades as information. When we're forced to make a decision and we don't feel well researched, we just opt for the thing that feels easy or comfortable or convenient. The thing that will cost us the least. Too many Christians avoid wrestling with the complexity of humanity and opt for the ease of jumping headlong into our tribal tendencies. But the faithful follower of Jesus strives to grow in wisdom, to be able to discern his good, perfect, and pleasing will. Wisdom is wrestling with the inner self until it has been conformed to the likeness of Christ. It means asking yourself hard questions like, why do I spend so much time thinking about the next thing I'll buy? Why do I feel such an impulse to compete with the people around me? Why do I continue to seek fulfillment in the things that I know are only fool's gold? To choose to be discerning means you have to be discerning about your own motives first. Discernment means you can see all the dominoes ahead of time, to see a chain reaction of consequences, because every decision is dynamic. There are no static decisions. For everything you choose, you're either saying yes or no to something else. If I buy this new truck, then I'll be limiting my financial flexibility and my generosity. If my son or daughter plays on this team, it means we're committing a certain amount of time to them and not to the other commitments that we've made. And occasionally, here's what happens, and please hear my heart for you in this. Here's what I see happens in students, happening for the last generation. We've somehow equivocated the importance level of our recreation with our religion. And that is a dangerous way. It's never something that we've done intentionally, but simply by these subtle maneuvers that we make with even the scheduling of time for our family, we communicate something to our children. Here's what's important. If I date an unbeliever, someone who does not share my same values, it's possible my desire for pleasure will erode my decision to live with purpose. Discerning people see those kinds of things. And you can run any sort of decision through this if-then paradigm: financial, relational, spiritual, ethical, moral, philosophical, practical. The wise are discerning. They cut through the noise. They see past the thing that's easy. They see the dynamics of each decision. To be wise is to anticipate problems without falling into either the danger of overconfidence or the paralysis of overcaution. See, pride is a pitfall, but we can also experience paralysis by analysis. Discerning people don't underthink or overthink. They just think. Wise people are not robotic. They don't repeat the same thing over and over again. Instead, they look at each situation, each circumstance, each opportunity with fresh eyes, with the ability to discern, and asking themselves about their motives, their right questions about why am I making this kind of decision. They're not fixed into one way of thinking about everything all of the time. A book that I read this last year, one of my favorites, and some other men in our church read it along with me. It's called Canoeing the Mountains. And it's a book about leadership, but it uses the story of the Corps of Discovery, a group commissioned by President Thomas Jefferson in 1804. And he began by hiring a man named Meriwether Lewis. Meriwether Lewis, who had a close compadre named William Clark. And Lewis and Clark are the people that you know as the leaders of this expedition. And what their goal was, what the end goal of the Corps of Discovery was, to find communicating waterways from the middle of the country all the way to the West Coast. And what they found along their journey as they began to pick up wisdom and insight was that no such waterways existed. These were river guides. They were men who knew the water well, and they were carrying their canoes, hoping to find the next spot to put their canoes in the water and find these communicating waterways. But instead of finding water, they ran into the Rocky Mountains. And what they didn't do in that moment is see the Rocky Mountains and turn around and say, we can't do this. We're not cut out for this. We don't know how to do it. We've got canoes with us. We're going to turn around and go. We're going to have somebody else sent out here who knows how to scale mountains. No, what they did instead was decide, we have a goal. Our job is to get to the very end of this country. And so we're going to set our canoes down and we're going to become mountaineers instead. What happens when you're on your way to find water but you run into the Rockies? Discerning people learn how to think through a situation. And I love what R.T. Kendall says. He says, sometimes the greatest opposition to what God wants to do next is those who are on the cutting edge of what God did last. See, yesterday's solutions don't always fit today's problems. And there has to be this moment in our lives as Christians when we take a step back and we say, okay, this is how I've always done it, but is this the best way to continue to do it? Wise people don't ignore, they engage with a discerning eye. They don't turn around and go home because they're not cut out for it. Instead, they dig in deeper. And they exchange their canoes for ropes. It's easy to live blind, to pretend as if problems don't exist, but they do. And we either engage the problem now or we pay for it later with interest. And parents in the room, if I could just for a moment, because I'm around students all the time, not just our students, but students all across the country in the summer. And here's what I promise. Okay? There are things that are in the possession of your students right now that we've not chosen to engage with a discerning eye. There's an app that was created when I was in high school. And that app had a singular purpose. It was to allow people to discreetly send nude images from one person to another. That app is now the primary mode and means of communication for the students that live in your households. And I promise, all of them have it. It's called Snapchat. Snapchat was created so that people could do things discreetly without the eyes of other people on them for accountability. Some of us use Snapchat every day. I'm not here to dog on you. I'm just asking us to be discerning. What is it that our students are actually investing their time and energy in? How are they training their minds? In what ways are they being discipled by a screen? Because all of those things are real. And you would be shocked. You'd be shocked at the number of things that your child is exposed to on a regular and repeated basis. And when we choose to ignore the problem and pretend as if it doesn't exist because we think they're safe because they're in their room and nothing can hurt them in there, and yet they have a whole world of possibility in their pocket. Parents, we must be discerning about the kinds of things that the people that we love most are engaged with. When something becomes second nature, we don't give it a second thought. But discerning people think through things all the time. Biblical wisdom brings discernment to the skill of daily living. To be wise is to recognize that there are multiple options or possible courses of action where other people can only imagine one or two. Wisdom discerns multiple dimensions of people's motives and character rather than putting everyone into these two binary categories of bad and good. Discernment is also the ability to tell the difference, not just between a good or a bad decision, but the recognition that there are good, better, and best decisions. And so the point of Proverbs is to get us rightly related to reality. Again, we've never thought enough about anything. But to live with eyes to discern is to think hard and to have sustained reflection, not about this simple decision, but about every dynamic that comes after that decision. Wise people have aimed their lives in a direction. Wise people operate with discernment. Wise people are also those who are disciplined. They have these consistent actions that they repeat over and over again. And this is a massive part of the book of Proverbs. You are what you repeatedly do, so are you wise? And discipline in the Proverbs is twofold. There is self-discipline, and this is the learned practice of remaining on the right path through repeated inputs, things that we repeat every day that ensure that we're not drifting, we're still headed in the right direction. But then there's also submission to discipline. This is the willingness to surround oneself with wise counsel and to submit the correction provided by those who have also aimed their arrows wisely. Self-discipline shows up in the Proverbs like this, in Proverbs chapter 6. Go to the ant, you sluggard, consider its ways and be wise. It has no commander, no overseer or ruler, yet it stores its provisions in summer and gathers its food at harvest. How long will you lie there, you sluggard? When will you get up from your sleep? A little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come on you like a thief, and scarcity like an armed man. In the submission of discipline in the form of other people. Proverbs chapter 3, verses 11 and 12. Do not despise the Lord's instruction, my son. Do not loathe his discipline, for the Lord disciplines the one that he loves, just as a father disciplines the son in whom he delights. Discipline is proof of God's love for us. Fathers, it's how we prove that we love our children, by holding their feet to the right path. Discipline is the distinguishing mark between the wise and the fool. It is a separator, and there's this myth perpetuated in our culture that discipline is simply a disposition, that there are certain people who are given to it and others are not, but I don't buy that for 1 second. See, discipline is simply the daily decision to dig your trench deeper and deeper. And as it fills with water, it creates a current that you get caught up in. All of a sudden, the things that you repeatedly do become who you are. And it carries you in the direction that you've chosen to go. Consider Jesus, who was disciplined to often withdraw to lonely places and pray. There was nothing convenient or noteworthy or publicly advantageous about Jesus' decision to repeatedly engage in quiet moments, yet it is the hallmark of his life and ministry. Paul discusses his own discipline at length when he's addressing the church in Corinth in 1 Corinthians chapter 9. Don't you realize that in a race, everyone runs, but only one person gets the prize? So run to win. All athletes are disciplined in their training. They do it to win a prize that will fade away, but we do it for an eternal prize. So I run with purpose in every step. I'm not just shadowboxing. I discipline my body like an athlete, training it to do what it should. Otherwise, I fear that after preaching to others, I myself might be disqualified. See, the thing Paul is describing, the thing that he often alludes to elsewhere, is this concept of zeal, this overwhelming passion to pursue the things of Jesus and ensure that they manifest themselves into the reality around us. Discipline is zeal directed well. So we must live with discipline. And one of the keys to discipline is not to focus on outcomes, but on inputs. We live, again, in an outcome-driven world. We can have anything we want in an instant, but that does not mean that we actually arrive where we want to be. When considering disciplines that help you become wise, think about small, simple, repeatable actions that align your life with Christ and your mind, body, and spirit with the work of his kingdom that he's called you to. What increases your capacity? What solidifies your calling? What strengthens your character? What supercharges your commitment? One of the areas that we try to apply discipline often to in our lives, and one of the most popular resolutions, is to find ourselves more fit this year, to lose some weight or to become stronger, to all different kinds of things. And so I'll just use this as a model of how we might shift from thinking about outcomes to thinking about inputs. If you make your goal to lose 25 pounds before vacation, we've all been there, well, then you'll probably fall right back into all the old habits, routines, and problematic areas that put ourselves in that position in the first place. Because the moment vacation is over, bring on the cake, baby, right? That's how we think. I hit my goal, I did my thing, and now I get to put a shirt on for the rest of the year, and no one knows the difference. But if instead you make it a goal to train your body to desire less sugar and to do more exercise, you're thinking differently. Now you're thinking along the lines of input-driven discipline. You begin to map a path towards things like just not eating sweets on weekdays or going to the gym for 30 minutes a day. Things that don't culminate with a specific arrival, but instead stack a simple habit on top of a simple habit. And that's where we actually become changed. The application of information. My mom likes to say this phrase. She says, choose your hard. Choose your hard. You can engage and do the difficult thing now, or you can find it to be far more disruptive later. Discipline is the decision to engage in the difficult thing now so that it isn't disruptive later. Because the worst time to build a foundation of faith is during the chaos of a storm. It's a terrible time to begin construction. Instead, the wise person begins building on bedrock, anticipating that the rain and the wind will come. And so discipline is the decision to do what is advantageous instead of what is easy. Pleasure provides for the moment, but fulfillment is found in delaying that pleasure into the future. Wise people place a premium on time, on resource, on integrity, on counsel, on discipline, on repeated investing inputs. Fools place a premium on what's fast, more, easy, echo chambers, comfortable, quick fixes. The wise and the fool cannot be on more different paths. One delays, one indulges. And as Jocko Willink likes to say, discipline equals freedom. A lot of us, we carry around an iPhone every day. Most people who love Jesus have an iPhone. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. Most people have an iPhone today. And so here's the thing about an iPhone is Apple will periodically release what they call a software update, right? They make this hardware and then they make software to be mapped directly onto that hardware. And oftentimes you'll be prompted to download your software update. And that software update might carry any number of things. It could carry an update that gives you new features, new opportunities, new ways to use your device. It might just contain a fix for something that hasn't been working right in the past. They call it a bug fix. But anytime your battery's not charged above 50% or you don't have enough space or these different kinds of things, sometimes the update, it'll just download. It hasn't taken any effect yet. You'll download it and it'll be there, and you thought maybe you'd updated your phone, but you go back and look and it says, oh no, you downloaded it, but you also need to install it. There's a difference between the download and the install. And here's the thing about wisdom is we can download as much information as we want. You could read the whole book of Proverbs and not a thing would change about you. Because there's a difference between the download and the install. It's the conscious action to say, I know the information. Now here's the way to apply it. Transformation happens with the right application of the information. And here's the crazy thing about the wisdom that comes from God's word. Is it almost always feels counterintuitive. It doesn't feel like the easy way. It's not convenient. It feels disruptive. It feels like we might have to change some things or do some things different. In fact, Paul says it this way in 1 Corinthians 1:18, for the word of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but it is the power of God to us who are being saved. God uses the foolishness of the cross to shame the wise of this world, and he says, listen, there's a way that we've been calibrated to pursue. To pursue yourself, do things that support you and make you significant and find success and all these different kinds of things. And Jesus is saying, that's not my way. And you'll keep chasing empty feeling after empty feeling, but if instead you learn to submit to Jesus, you don't just download the information, but you install it into your life, things will actually begin to change. But here's the hard thing. Here's the hard thing. Because when you say, yes, I want to install, I have the information downloaded, I want to install, then there's this other prompt. Are you sure this will require a reset? Are you sure this will require a reset? And friends, I'm just telling you, if we want to rightly apply the wisdom that we find in God's word, not just in Proverbs, it will require us to reset what we think about the world right now. Because if Proverbs teaches us anything, it's that we've never thought about things enough. We've never thought things through well enough. There's always more to think through, but there's one singular thing that we must do. We must claim the Jesus way over all other ways. And it will require a reset for us to calibrate our instruments correctly in order to pursue the direction he has for us, for us to put on discerning eyes to learn to be wise about the world around us, for us to apply even the smallest ounce of discipline so that we can keep ourselves on the path that we've picked. We will never be rightly related to the reality of Jesus unless we do those things. It's going to require a reset. So I don't know if you made a decision to follow Jesus a long time ago, but man, life has just been a struggle, and there's some things that do not line up, and you just want some help. You want somebody to pray with you. You want to figure some things out. Man, we're here for that. We are. We are a church family. We've all aimed our arrows in a specific direction, and we'd like to say, let's come alongside each other and figure this out together. Maybe you've never chosen to follow Jesus. You've never clung to the wisdom of the cross and forsaken the wisdom of this world. It's looked like foolishness until now, and you're beginning to see it. And I'm just telling you, it's going to require a reset. And those things are hard, but man, are they worth it. Let me invite you. If that's you today and you've never claimed Jesus, I would love for you to begin this year with that decision.